Jes POV. A few days passed from when we returned to the city before I saw the Queen again. We did have one more meeting the next day, but it was quickly decided that danger was too big of an issue for one kingdom alone, so she sent messengers to their allies. 4 days passed, which I spent training with both the Drakes and the Royal Mages, and even some court mages once the Queen found a few trustworthy ones, and making a new weapon with Seal. At the Queen's request, I also allowed her to copy several of my memories onto magical tools for later study, but that took less than a few hours. Before I knew it, several parties of delegates from the neighbouring kingdoms had arrived, and I was being called in by the Queen once more. Suma was also invited, but the Queen must have noticed how nervous she was and assured her she did not need to attend, which was probably a good idea, because as soon as Suma heard the words international delegation, I felt a wave of nervous nausea hit her like 10 metric tons of bricks through our connection. It was enough to even make me feel sick for a brief second. Walking into the castle, I was escorted this time not to the Queen's normal meeting hall, but a much smaller room, akin to where my trial had taken place several months ago. There were 3 pseudo-grandstands, all forming a rounded triangle, and dozens of Nume perched on small posts jutting out from each one. They were chatting amongst themselves when I walked in. Some stopped and took notice of me. Others didn't seem to care, and continued their conversations. "This way, Sir Sentinel," the escort said, and led me to one of the 3 stands. On this stand were the Queen, several generals I'd met before, Captain Gigualas, and about a dozen Nume I'd never seen. They put a chair out for me, but really, it was just 7 of the normal posts woven together with magic. It was uncomfortably tall, and my feet hung 20 centimeters off the ground, and despite being made from several posts, it was still a bit narrow. But I sat down nonetheless, and was greeted by both one of the generals and Captain Gigualas. An announcer who had been watching the Queen rose as soon as she received the signal, spreading his wings and silencing the crowd by saying, "Here speaks the sovereign ruler of Ambos, our great country, Queen Ompera." The Queen, no more than a third of a metre tall, fluttered down to an isolated post in front of the stands, and stood as proudly as she could and spoke loudly. "Greetings to you all, and welcome to my country." A darkly coloured Nume, just a smidge taller than the Queen, but much older, fluttered off his post, and landed on another post that stood in front of his stand. Another announcer came forward and introduced him. "Here speaks the elected High Noble of Apepdon, Chancellor Iaron." The Chancellor spoke. "Greetings, Queen Ompera. The country of Apepdon awaits." Just then, the process repeated itself a third and final time. A Nume, this time with reddish-brown feathers, came to the post, and his announcer spoke. "Here speaks the sovereign ruler of New Lerna, King Hydra." King Hydra was younger than the Chancellor, but older than Queen Ompera. "Greetings, Queen Ompera. The country of New Lerna awaits." Queen Ompera spoke. "I thank you all for coming on such short notice. A meeting of the allied nations has not occurred since before my father's reign, when war darkened our skies. But now a greater threat is rising, and we must all face it together." "Another rebellion?" King Hydra asked quickly. "No." The Queen looked to me and gestured for me to come forward with her wing. I hopped off the uncomfortable post and walked around to her side. "This is Sentinel, a familiar to one of my soldiers. He is a Viking." There were audible gasps from nearly everyone, and whispers filled the room. "Please, everyone, be at ease," the Queen called out. "Is this the threat, Queen Ompera? The return of the Vikings?" Chancellor Aaron asked. "That would explain the secrecy. Best not to let the public at large know." King Hydra arrived. "No, Sentinel is a guest." She turned to me. "Please introduce yourself and alleviate their fears." I took a deep breath before starting. "Hello, everyone." There was a silence. Not the polite silence in which people just whisper when someone is talking. It was a stunned silence, quieter than death. I am a member of the species you know as Vikings, but we call ourselves humans. And please, do not worry. Only 3 of us even know your kind exist anymore. Until coming here, I'd never once even heard of a Nume. And, to my knowledge, no more humans will be arriving, unless one of you brings them here like I was. "Apep's voice," someone from the other stand said, probably amazed I could speak. I continued. The threat Queen Umpera brought you all here for is not my people, but I am going to help you solve the situation, and hopefully we can work out a plan today that will save lives. I glanced at the Queen, and she nodded her head, saying in a firm tone, "Tell them." Looking back to the stands, I finished. The Chaos Dragon that scarred your world is returning, and soon. "What is the meaning of this, Queen Umpera?" King Hydra nearly shouted. "Surely this is some ruse. A joke is not appropriate for a meeting of this magnitude," Chancellor Aaron scolded. The rest of their stands were either in shock by my presence and the news, or nervously talking amongst themselves about one or both. Our stands were quiet, apparently already filled in on the situation. "Your Majesty." I turned to Queen Umpera and asked, "May I silence them? I have more news." "If you can," she said, glancing at the increasingly uproarious stands. I like to say that I started studying more about sound magic after what happened on Sangu Dragon with Harbinger, but that would be a lie. Instead, I used a skill perfected during my lifetime as Zachariah, and one that nearly countless Nume had tried to teach me as Jake, but I'd always failed to learn. Casting by instinct. Rather than relying on my knowledge of sound waves alone, I'd focus on what effects I wanted from the spell. As Zachariah, I'd used it to shut up plenty of mouthy council members who cut me off, but combining it with the knowledge of Jake would perfect the spell. It was cast in an instant. All sound waves not matching my voice would be cancelled out. Instantly, the room was quiet, and I was free to speak again. "Listen," I said, keeping my voice calm and even. Everyone was shocked, some screaming silently at me, but uselessly. "This is no joke or ruse or anything of the like. This is real, and if we do not work together to solve this issue, your world will be destroyed. I know where the dragon will come from, and I have a general idea when it will arrive. But I do not yet know how to stop it. That is the purpose of this meeting." With all that said, I ended the spell, and chaos ensued. They started with the obvious questions, and I answered them as best I could. "Where will the dragon come from? You said you know," Chancellor Aaron asked. "The dragon is currently trapped in the ether, in a split between worlds used by the dragons to travel from one world to another. This split is under a mountain called Dragon's Horde, just outside a military training base in Amboss." "How do you know all this?" Chancellor Aaron asked. "Is he in league with the beast?" Someone nearby in the Apopdon stands whispered, but was shot death glares by Chancellor Aaron. "No, I am not. I know this because I was responsible for sending the dragon away during the ravaging alongside my then-summoner, Amboss." "But that was so long ago. How old are you?" King Hydra asked. "My body or my mind?" I asked rhetorically. "I have the memories of Zachariah, the partner of Amboss. I've come to think of Zachariah as a kind of past life. Once I even possessed a portion of his soul, but that's a long story. It would take me like 2.5 books worth of paper to do it justice." "When will this happen?" King Hydra asked. "Very soon. At best 21 days. "And at worst?" This time it was Queen Umpera who asked. "Maybe it already did," I acknowledged. "And what would you have us do? Raise an army, perhaps? Would that be enough?" Chancellor Aaron asked. "It's a start," I said. "Is there a way to seal it inside this split you mentioned?" he asked. "I have no idea." "But I thought you said you had all of Amboss's familiar's memories. He did it, yes?" King Hydra pointed out. "Not exactly. Zachariah sacrificed himself by dragging both himself and the dragon into the split, but he never sealed it. He kept the dragon there by force. Eventually he and the dragon were affected by the raw ether and melded together. One half of his mind wanted to leave, the other wanted to stay. They were trapped there," I said, fishing for my memories. "Then something has changed, I presume?" "Yes, I did. I came to this world and drew their attention in the ether. They both saw me and wanted to use me. The dragon wanted to escape, but the other sought to finally finish what I'd started. A portion of his soul was placed into mine, twice, but the ether had twisted them up so much that their magic did not work properly, and they only managed to cause me injury. Long story short, the dragon took back the portion of his soul, but the man did not. This caused an imbalance, which is exactly what is allowing the dragon to go free. Now one of them has the power to force out the other and free themselves," I explained. I kept it short and as simple as I could make it. Then the solution is clear. Familiar, you have a duty to once again seal the dragon away, no matter the cost. Chancellor Aeron said flatly. I knew exactly what he was saying. He was telling me to sacrifice myself. If it comes to that, I will. I made friends here, a family. If I must once again drag danger into the split, then so be it. But my soul is damaged. The man and dragon have both taken a toll on it, I said, remembering what I'd heard when I gained Zachariah's memories. There is no guarantee that doing that will work a second time. I see, Queen Ompera said thoughtfully. She covered the tip of her curved beak with one of her wings in consideration. Is there anything about the mountain that is special? Why is this split there? It was once the home of Arshem, I said. The Queen did not react. She probably already knew, but Captain Kigualas and several generals by him looked shocked. There were also guardians of sorts. Guardians? King Hydra asked. Creations of Upap the Thunderer, left behind to guard the split. They will attack the dragon, I assume, but they will attack us as well. Lord Upap? Chancellor Aeron said. Are you sure? Well, others helped, but it was mostly him, I was told, I said. Tell me, do you know what happened to Lord Upap? He asked. He left with Arshem during the Dage's rampage. The ravaging. Why? I still don't really know, I said. It was something that plagued me in this life and my last. It doesn't make sense. Why leave one of your own to destroy an entire world? My answer did seem to satisfy him, but he didn't have a follow-up for it. He shook his head, disappointed. Tell us more about the Guardians, Queen Ompera said. What do we need to know? I thought back to my meeting with them in boot camp, and seeing them as Upap proudly showed them off to many onlookers. They are fairly smart, fast, poisonous, and most do not need light to see. They can sense mana quite well, but do not use magic in the same way most familiars can. They were designed that way to prevent issues with the Ether Portal. Upap decided it was better for them to be physically powerful, rather than magically gifted, partially to take advantage of how they usually fight in enclosed spaces, and because using too much mana near the Ether can cause... well, he called it dissonance, but I don't know what that means. Queen Ompera interrupted. I hope you will now see why I brought Sentinel here today. He will act as a guide, a repository of knowledge, but we must quickly devise a plan to do what our ancestors failed to do, and defeat the Chaos Dragon. What do you suggest then, Sentinel? Chancellor Aeron asked. I thought for a moment. Well, I guess we need to do the first thing you always do whenever something impossible comes up. We start by moving a mountain.